Released in 1988 by Konami on the PC-88 and the MSX, Snatcher is a graphic adventure that was ported and enhanced for other systems such as the PC Engine CD, the Saturn and PlayStation, but the only version released in the West came 6 years later in 1994 for the Mega CD. Snatcher owes its Western release to Konami localizer Jeremy Blaustein, who went on to work on games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Metal Gear Solid, and my favourite game of all time, Silent Hill 2. In 2047, Neo Kobe is about to implode. Set 30 years after an event known only as a catastrophe, a biological weapon attack that wiped out 50% of the world's population, the city is plagued by murderous robots who then take on the identity of their victims, which are then known as Snatchers, as in Body Snatcher. You play the role of Gillian Seed just as he's been recruited as a junker, a sort of detective and executioner hybrid, and you roam the streets looking for leads on why the Snatchers exist, who made them and what their aim is. As a game, Snatcher looks absolutely primitive today, interactions via a menu system where you decide what you want to do. To break it up, there's occasionally combat sequences which are played like whack-a-mole. You're presented with a 3x3 grid and you shoot enemies as they pop up. If you're familiar with the Phoenix Wright series, then you know how engrossing the games in this format can be. After all, you play a big part in how this story unfolds, and there's a real satisfaction seeing all the various plot threads and puzzle pieces come together. There's some surprisingly human moments as well. Gillian and his psychic robot navigator, Metal Gear Mark II, named after the big tank of Metal Gear of course, have a buddy cop style relationship, and you can call your estranged wife and just talk. There's no real in-game reasons to do so, but adds another layer of human emotion to the whole thing. There's some moments of extreme gore as well, which somehow managed to escape the video game moral panic of the time, probably because no one bought it. Don't forget, this came out after the likes of Night Trap was seen as an evil force corrupting our children with low production values. Here's some of the worst scenes edited for more sensitive viewers. But what Snatcher does brilliantly in my opinion is that it gives you free reign across this incredibly realised world. As a kid I used to love watching the cityscape backgrounds in games and I used to wonder what it was like for people living there. When I first played Snatcher on the original release, I felt for the first time I had explored the digital cityscapes that I loved as a kid. There's an astonishing level of detail in Neo Kobe, and I can interact with it in ways that are small but meaningful, unlike the open world games of today where all we can really do is drive cars and shoot guns. It's a game that came out before copyright was a big deal as well. In the original Japanese release, the patrons of Outer Heaven were all famous film and TV monsters. For the Mega CD version, they were turned into other Konami characters, and the original name for Pls Cavern, a sort of black market supermarket you visit along the way, was Joy Division, probably due to its unknown pleasures? Yeah? Suit yourself. But of course, what's really notable about Snatcher is that it's one of the earliest games by Hideo Kojima. And you can see in Snatcher that Kojima was starting to build his own mini-universe here. Metal Gear is an obvious reference point. Gillian's wife Jamie Seed and bounty hunter Random Jill make cameos in spiritual follow-up Policenauts, and one of Policenauts' main characters is Mara Silverberg, who's now best known as Solid Snake's love interest in Metal Gear Solid. But even though we recognise Kojima as one of the biggest names in games development, Snatcher was not a hit in the West, and it's not that hard to see why, seeing it was a niche genre released on an even more niche console. But in my view, this is the game that defined Kojima, warts and all. As with Metal Gear, Kojima wears his cinematic influences on his sleeve. The whole game is practically a love letter to Blade Runner. Gillian Seed is basically anime Harrison Ford as Rick Deckard. Then you've got the Snatchers, who are obviously influenced by James Cameron's Terminators, and Random Jill is a spinning image of everyone's favourite Geordie, Sting, in Dune. There's a few other Kojima trademarks here as well: breaking the fourth wall, big plot twists, and yeah. As I mentioned earlier, Snatcher had a spiritual sequel with Policenauts, essentially Lethal Weapon but in space. A localised version for the 3DO was planned, but low sales of both Snatcher and the 3DO itself put those plans to rest. There's also a cute JRPG spin-off, SD Snatcher, which is the same story but about 1,000 times more adorable. Aww. And more recently, in 2011, Goichi Suda, the man behind Killer 7 and No More Heroes, wrote and produced Snatcher, an audio drama prequel focusing on Jean-Jacques Gibson, with music from Silent Hill composer and all-round genius Akira Yamaoka. Despite it being a sales flop at the time, in my view Snatcher deserves to be seen as perhaps the most ambitious title of the 16-bit era, an early example of a cinematic approach to mainstream gaming featuring a genuinely emotional story. Nowadays, Konami is a shell of its former self after its fortunes went south during the 360 era. Once great series such as Castlevania, Contra, Metal Gear, Goemon and Silent Hill have all been left to rot, but it's one of gaming's biggest missed opportunities that we never got to explore more of Neo Kobe. Now that Kojima has moved on from Konami, it's unlikely we ever will.